This archive represents the accounts of 6 defense intelligence agents, part of a mission where 12 US military personnel traveled to serve. I can't say this without laughing.
I can't wait for this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lucky episode 13 of the Co-Conspirators podcast. I'm your host, John, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Luke.
Hi, everyone.
And Callum.
Hello there.
For this week's episode, which is all about film conspiracies. Our tastes in film differ much like they do with music, as mentioned in our previous episode. Myself and Callum sometimes enjoy science fiction, particularly Star Wars, and Luke prefers award-winning critic pleasers such as Birdman. We're also joined by our very first guest and resident film expert, George. So, George, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and some of your interests in film and even conspiracies?
Just to get this out there, I wouldn't class myself as a resident film expert, but if you're going to call me that, I'll take what I can get.
Compared to us, absolutely you are.
Yeah, that's not really hard, though, especially in your case. But, yeah, so did a film and journalism degree at university, and since then started writing for a website called Clapper Limited, and we've been covering a lot of independent films lately, and we've just started our own podcast as well called Clappercast, which involves a revolving set of guests. Obviously, with the lockdown at the moment, the big releases are on hold, but once cinemas reopen, we're hoping to branch out for bigger films while retaining our focus on smaller films as well. In terms of my taste, my favourite film is probably Birdman. I don't know if we'll actually explain that joke for anyone. There's not much to it, really.
Yeah, so
Luke
No, it's not.
I'll explain it quickly for you. So we do actually know George from school, and at school, George was always a big film fan, and I'm more into cheesy films, and George recommended Birdman so heavily, you know, it's the greatest film ever, all that kind of jazz, and I checked it out and just found it the worst film ever, and we just debated that, and it's just become a bit of a meme between us for the last, 4 or 5 years, however long that crap's been.
Low effort winding up, I think.
Oh yeah, it's like the easiest bait known to man. But yeah, in terms of conspiracies, I'm not really a massive conspiracy nut, but I kind of like the idea of them more than what some people churn out in terms of theories. I think we all love the idea of maybe something not being quite right. But well, I hope to be converted by the end of this episode, really.
I'm sure you will be, and I know you've listened to some of the other episodes, so I'm sure
Yeah,
they've gone at least some way to converting you.
Yeah, I'm gradually getting there. Maybe by the end of this, I'll be a fully fledged conspiracist.
Yeah, so there's one thing just listening to them secondhand, but actually first-hand contributing to the discussion, bringing your own theories when you start to open your eyes a little bit. So that's what we like to think anyway.
Yeah, it's like really entertaining, like researching them, and obviously some bits hold more water than others. So you can kind of laugh at some bits while you're researching, but then you kind of go down this rabbit hole of like information where there's seemingly no end. But found it quite hard to stop myself.
I think the thing is, whenever I research a theory, it's always so one-sided and biased, but it still always manages to sway me, and I just always get into what I'm researching and feel kind of passionately about it.
I was going to say, you become kind of attached to your own theory, don't you?
You get that sort of like positive
Yeah.
confirmation bias, and you keep getting more and more information about it. Think, oh, that adds to it. Oh, that adds a little bit of weight here and there. And especially when you're not really trying to look for the conflicting stuff or the stuff that sort of brings you back down to earth. It does sort of build this picture of everything. Oh, yeah, it's got a great believability. They're really going to rate this one. It turns out it gets torn to shreds.
Okay, so yeah, as you've heard there, no finer choice for today's podcast, which is all about films or movies, than George, and that's our topic for today. So, the world of films, and particularly Hollywood, has long been controversial, from minor controversies about how long it took Leonardo DiCaprio to win an Oscar, and some of the dissatisfaction with all-female remakes, like Ghostbusters, to far darker allegations, such as the infamous casting couch and Harvey Weinstein's treatment of young women, as well as Oscar-winning director Roman Polanski's rape of a 13-year-old girl and subsequent 48 years spent as a fugitive from the US justice system. And so I'll hand over to George for our first theory.
So kind of pick maybe one of the biggest ones in terms of actresses and actors, and it focuses on the death of one of Hollywood's most enduring screen icons in Marilyn Monroe. So after a decade in the limelight, of which she struggled with depression and anxiety, the 36-year-old died in 1962 in what was deemed a probable suicide. The inconclusive reports have led to numerous conspiracy theories in the subsequent decades, casting suspicion on whether the blonde bombshell succumbed to her personal demons or she was murdered for ulterior motives.
I think the thing with famous suicides is there's always going to be a conspiracy. I don't think you can really look at a famous suicide and not find a conspiracy about it, especially someone as big as Marilyn Monroe is.
Nicely leads on from the last episode we discussed Kurt Cobain's suicide. With a theme going on here.
I think the Cobain one's a bit more mainstream than this one. There's so many angles to this one, which I'll get into, obviously, that you don't know really where to begin. Where I think Cobain's, there's one really dominant angle, which is why it's gained so much traction. So Monroe was born on the 1st of June 1926 as Norma Jean Mortensen. Being raised in Los Angeles throughout her tumultuous childhood, she flickered between foster homes in her youth before marrying at the age of 16. She began to work as a model after catching the eye of a photographer in a factory during the war. This work, which helped her gain contacts, gave her an entry point to the film industry. After a rocky start in which she only appeared in minor roles, a new contract with 20th Century Fox in 1950 gave Monroe the opportunity to play larger roles. In just 3 years, she'd repaid their faith and become one of the most bankable stars in the world after leading performances in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The 7-Year Itch. Growing tired with being typecast as the dumb blonde, she formed her own production company in 1954 and began to study method acting, leading to a more lucrative yet less constrictive contract with Fox. By the end of the decade, she had added critical acclaim to her box office appeal, winning a Golden Globe for Some Like It Hot.
What kind of method acting did she do?
I think method acting's a really hard thing to describe. I think ultimately it's like a way of just saying that it's more of a craft than a hobby. So someone like Hugh Grant, he said he just fell into acting, and you can kind of see that in the roles he's played. He's played like quite similar roles throughout his career, whereas someone like Marlon Brando prefers to get like more immersed in the character. Ultimately is a bit of a waffle, the term. I think it's just more, I think she's just to be taken seriously more than anything.
I think the thing is, when I hear method acting, I'm just like thinking of like Christian Bale, like losing tons of weight and then getting ripped for the next film. But I guess it's just a blanket term and it's more about getting into the character.
Yeah, like Christian Bale's method acting is just like losing weight, whereas Joaquin Phoenix's weight has stayed the same throughout his whole career. So even though they're both considered the like foremost method actors of their generation, there's really nothing that similar in the way they approach characters. So I think it is just a massive blanket term.
Fair enough.
So throughout all of this, Monroe had a turbulent personal life, divorcing from well-known figures in the form of baseball star Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller. This affected her work in the early 60s, with the actress firmly addicted to drugs, suffering from numerous health problems, and being hospitalised multiple times for depression. She was subsequently in a bitter dispute with Fox regarding her sickness, briefly being sacked by the company before they tried re-signing her after they realised she was far too valuable to lose. Tragically, she never got to resume her career, as she was found dead on her bed, surrounded by empty medicine bottles on the 4th of August, 1962. The official cause of death was listed as probable suicide, caused by acute barbiturate poisoning. The possibility of an accidental overdose was ruled out due to the large dosages found in her body, which were reportedly several times over the legal limit. The autopsy states that there were no external bruises on the body and no suicide note was left, though the doctor noted she experienced severe depression, abrupt mood swings, and crippling anxiety.
I'm quite surprised, to be honest, that they mentioned she had depression and anxiety, because I was kind of under the impression, in the 50s that those kind of things people just didn't believe they existed, really, and there was just no awareness of them.
I think the fact you're surprised by it kind of confirms that they did keep these things under wraps as well.
Yeah, I mean, her personality, though, you wouldn't describe her as anxious to look at her when you see her performances. And when she sung live to the president and things like that, she certainly had an air of confidence.
I think you just put that down to drugs, though, I guess.
Conspirators have noted that, in the midst of a new deal with Fox and a rumoured remarriage to DiMaggio, it is unlikely that Monroe would take her own life at this stage, leading them to pursue other explanations for her death. Several doctors and scientists have noted that the dosages of the sedatives listed in the autopsy are unlikely given their potency, saying that she'd be dead long before reaching those levels. The first officer on the scene, Jack Clemens, noted that Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, was doing the laundry when he arrived. An odd action considering the time, which was roughly between 3 and 4 a.m, and the fact that no cause of death had been established at that point. He also questioned the lack of vomit in the room, stating that the sheer volume of barbiturates consumed would cause a violent reaction in the stomach. Some state, although others counter this, that the capsule supposedly swallowed has a yellow dye and would leave residue in the lining of the stomach, something that was never found in the autopsy. One thing that was picked up, however, was the purplish colour of the colon, suggesting that the barbiturates were administered through the use of an enema. The coroner also said that specimens he collected at the scene were due to be inspected for microscopic analysis, but these were unsurprisingly lost or destroyed.
As usual.
Isn't an enema something that goes on
Yeah.
the bottom?
Yeah, I was thinking that. What a strange way to commit suicide.
This was
Drugged it.
like never proven. So judging by the autopsy, she had say defects with the colon, and this was like never explained. Which is why
Explain.
some people have said that coupled with the dosages, this is why she didn't swallow them, and instead they were administered another way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So even with a slightly inconsistent toxicology report, there still needs to be a viable option as to why she was potentially murdered, the key of which lies in her personal life and romantic affairs. Just 3 months before her death, as John noted, a performance of Happy Birthday for then President John F. Kennedy has been seen as final proof that the pair were having an affair, and this further information come out that she was also having an affair with Kennedy's brother and the Attorney General Robert. These romantic relationships have been the launchpad for conspiracies.
To be fair, I never really have heard about these rumours of her and JFK. I don't really know if they're mainstream and well known. Probably two biggest people in America at the time for sure, if not the world.
I think they are well known because I'm almost the other way. I wasn't aware they were up for much debate. I thought they were as good as concrete and well established.
Yeah,
I
it
think
didn't really
most
come
of
out at the time.
Yeah, I think noting just that video of her singing Happy Birthday, there's definitely an atmosphere there between the two.
Should we say it was a seductive performance, or sultry, if you will?
Definitely
there's
very
a-
much so.
It's a bit-
There's a photograph after the performance as well, backstage, of Monroe with both Kennedy brothers, and it's like the only surviving photo with them. So it's kind of viewed as like the night where it was official that these three had an affair. Not the two Kennedy brothers with each other. That would just be fucking weird. But
The double team.
Wouldn't rule it out. They're from southern states of America.
so these romantic relationships have been the launchpad for conspiracies, examining whether Monroe was killed to save face, preserve government secrets, or because of her political beliefs. Beginning in the 1970s, several books were published that brought these fringe theories towards the mainstream, with a 1973 biography by Norman Mailer claiming that Monroe was killed by the FBI or CIA to be used as a pressure point against the Kennedys. So it's quite broad. Might as well throw like the NSA in with it as well. So his book was actually disproven. He himself said it was just to sell stuff, but I think it like facilitated maybe more interest in the case. Senior executives at the CIA and FBI were supposedly wanted to send a message after the Bay of Pigs debacle, and this account was also backed in a 2003 book as well. Some conspiracists have offered a different slant to the theory, with many highlighting that Monroe was long rumoured to harbour a communist ideology stemming from her marriage to Miller. Given America was notoriously worried about the threat of communism from Cuba, a romantic link between JFK and Monroe would certainly look bad. Other theorists have posited that the Kennedys ordered a hit on Monroe, with the potential leaking of both brothers' activity with the actress bound to cause disastrous consequences on their political careers.
I think that would literally be the most American thing ever, killing Marilyn Monroe because she had communist ideology.
I suppose the President and his Justice Secretary are in bed with a communist, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So that's going to certainly have the red states up in arms.
Maybe that's why JFK got killed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's a commie as well.
Oh, they were all at it. The Cubans were successful in their mission. So furthermore, several of Monroe's friends have noted that she kept a red diary in which she recorded information detailing her encounters with the Kennedys, with declassified FBI documents stating that Monroe was preparing to call a press conference in which she would tell all. This document also seems to incriminate Robert Kennedy, who said he wasn't in LA on the day of her death. The report states that he was in a nearby Beverly Hills hotel, seemingly supporting a theory from numerous people that he and Monroe had met on the day of her death. This was also backed by the LAPD, who said they had several witnesses, including an officer who saw Kennedy in LA on that day. The report also shows that Monroe's publicist, who was said to be, in quote marks, fully cooperative in the investigation, had subsequently been given a job in the federal office. It also alluded to operations that involved bugging, wiretapping, and constant surveillance. The man who provided Robert's alibi, John Bates, was interviewed by the BBC in 1985 after the documents were leaked, and he gave vague, hesitant answers when pressed on how Kennedy reacted to the news of Monroe's death. This interview, you can see it on YouTube, it's in video, and it seems like he's barely there, like half asleep, so definitely something not quite right there.
It's a lot better than some of the interviews we've been presenting lately where they're kind of alleged rather than actually happened, and usually very damning, but there's absolutely zero proof of it. So it's nice to have one where there's actually
And
video
you say
evidence.
that, but we have had this is a moon landing once where John recounted the fact that how shifty the astronauts were basically immediately after landing back on Earth.
Yeah.
And the Diana BBC panorama.
We've had the best of
Yeah,
both worlds, I
yeah.
think, which is most natural with conspiracies.
With the astronaut one, though, I thought the whole thing is that they go back one way and come back like completely different. Especially if they saw aliens up there, which one of you debated on the theory. I mean, you would come back pretty changed after that, I think.
Yeah, you were.
Maybe they were probed.
That same year, the aforementioned housekeeper, Eunice Murray, stated that she believed Robert was at Marilyn's house on the afternoon of her death. Her version of events has been questioned a little bit because she wrote a book and then she immediately gave this interview after, and the information she gave in the interview, none of which she disclosed in the book. So obviously there's more pressure to disclose stuff in a book because you've got publishers and editors looking over your shoulder, whereas with a television interview you have a little bit more free reign, I would say. Maybe not loads, but enough where you can say some stuff that you can't say in a book.
Yeah, plus you can sort of say it before anyone has a chance to react, rather than if you get it, having to send drafts and redraft, but you edit, especially if it's a live interview.
Yeah, so that interview was in the same year as well as the one with John Bates, who provided Robert's alibi. So it was all kicking off in 85. So these new revelations, which came after a short-lived reopening of the case in 1982, led to further rumours and a growing suspicion, with the case reportedly being on the verge of having a new lease of life in 1993. And yet again, these plans were scuppered when the person in charge of the new inquiry was fired from his job the next day, leaving plans for a grand jury in tatters. I tried researching why he was fired, and I couldn't find anything. I don't know if it was like the rumblings of
Sounds
one
dodgy.
guy, but I literally couldn't find a thing on it. So it's a little bit suspicious. The most convoluted angle of this whole saga is the purported involvement of the mob, both in terms of wiretapping and potential murder. So it's been like an open secret for a long time that JFK collaborated with the mob in order to win the Illinois vote in particular during his presidential election. And his father, Joseph Patrick Kennedy, was a bootlegger for a period as well. The key figure in all this is Sam Giancana, a Chicago-based mobster whose life was depicted in a 1992 book, Double Cross. The book, which was written by Giancana's nephew, details his close relationship with the CIA, which states that the mobster was part of JFK's operation, which focused on killing Fidel Castro in 1960, and then he was subsequently hired as a contract killer for Monroe in 62. What information could Monroe have held that meant the CIA had to act? Some have supposed that she had intimate knowledge of the Roswell UFO incident of 1947, but it will likely remain unknown, even if some documents are eventually declassified.
So there's rumours that she was a commie, and there's rumours that somehow she knew about the Roswell.
Yeah.
How did she find out about that?
Bed in
JFK.
JFK.
Industrial killer
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah. She must have woken up one morning and be like, John, so did that Roswell thing really happen? You know, you can tell me. Then moves on to the other brother when she finally gets what she wants.
Just rolls over
To
in
be
the
fair,
bed.
Yeah.
Rob, what do you think of this?
you were sleeping with the president and had him around your finger, what would you ask him? I'd probably go,
Yeah,
to be honest.
me too.
Hashtag me too.
Yeah, I've become part of that movement after I got used.
When you were using him to find out if aliens existed.
Exactly.
Can you imagine if that came out? Co-conspirators host John finds out that aliens are sleeping.
Goes very deep undercover on the podcast. Literally deep undercover.
Taking gonzo journalism to a whole new level.
It would get us viral, I think, so I'd just say go for it.
Yeah.
To be fair, he would just say it's fake news and get away with it. Like,
As long as John says no homo, it's fine.
so it goes without saying that Monroe was involved with both Kennedy brothers, and that Robert in particular lied about his whereabouts on the day of the death. But for what reason? Was she silenced to save face and spare a personal crisis for the President and Attorney General? Was she killed because she held critical knowledge? Was she merely an innocent bystander in an acrimonious relationship between the Kennedys and the mob? Was she simply a star who burned too bright too soon? Much like the subsequent assassinations of both Kennedy brothers, her death will be shrouded in mystery and probably never fully explained. But influence on popular culture will never wane.
It's something that's kind of been the case in other cases we've mentioned, such as Kurt Cobain and Princess Diana, was how much would a paparazzi be on her case? Because that always seems to kind of drive people over the edge a bit.
It was Marilyn Monroe. I think it's safe to assume they were on her case 24/7.
Yeah, I just don't know how intense the paparazzi were in the 50s and 60s. I'm assuming not much has really changed.
She had like scandal throughout her whole life. So before she became an actress,
Yeah.
she did a nude photo shoot for a calendar. And because she was romantically involved with like Joe DiMaggio, who was probably the biggest baseball player at the time, this was like absolutely a massive scandal. So you can imagine if that's the scale it was on that level, imagine it coming out that she was not only with the president or the attorney general, but both of them, and they happen to be brothers as well.
Yeah,
Like, it would have been way bigger than Watergate, I think, as well, because it is an abuse of power ultimately. So, and with the Kennedys, links with the mob, as I said, it's really confusing because it was there throughout their whole history. But then Robert, in particular, went after the mob in the mid-60s, which is why the book is called Double Cross, I think, because the mobsters are like, we help you and your brother get in, and now you're coming after us. Like, what the fuck, mate?
Just
Understatement.
on the topic of the mob, so I was thinking back to The Irishman. Can you remember what era that was set in, or what decade? Because there was some links between presidents and mob. And
I can actually expand on this. So, Al Pacino's character in The Irishman, he plays Jimmy Hoffa. And
yeah,
Hoffa notoriously hated Robert Kennedy, like absolutely hated him.
that's coming back to me a bit more. Yeah,
Yeah, so Hoffa's he's never fully in this case, but he's like circling around the edges. And actually, I'm not going to say because it's a spoiler for The Irishman, but he's in murky waters anyway. And then you mix him in with this. And I mean, I think the problem with this conspiracy is there's so many angles in it, and it's missing like one thread to link them all together. So, I mean, we can dismiss the UFO one straight away.
Can we?
I mean, it's bollocks. It's absolute bollocks.
we're not
No
entirely
way.
dismissing UFOs though, because my theory does pertain to them. A little
Yeah, not
bit.
that. There's
But
there's no way that JFK would give her that after like one night or 2 nights or whatever. So I don't think she was with JFK for very long. I think she was more romantically in with Robert. I think they were more of an item.
And is Marilyn Monroe really caring about UFOs? I don't want to stereotype.
Unless she's a
but-
commie. That's where it links in. There was one memo from J. Edgar Hoover, who's obviously the chief of the FBI at the time, and he got a memo from one of his agents saying that Monroe had asked JFK about the results of a hydrogen bomb test. So maybe she was more politically attuned than what we think. You know, don't judge a book by its cover.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I think a lot of big celebrities always get very passionate about politics in some way or another, and you could picture her as the kind of person who, you know, wants the best for everyone, and very much that is the communist ideology in a way. Whether it actually results in that or not is a different story, but it's that kind of persona.
I suppose it depends on if she was going to break this news, which the CIA thought she was, judging by their documents, and you can read it in a documentary. They were adamant she was going to call a press conference. It's kind of up for debate whether she was just going to talk about the relationships with these two brothers, or if she had more extensive knowledge. So mentioning like that red diary, that was never found, although it's also never been proven to actually exist either. So that's murky waters as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that you did make the great point of saying there's that lacking that one piece that would really tie everything together. But this is quite a really interesting theory, the fact that it's got a lot of things that, say, medically don't really add up regarding the actual suicide attempt. And then the whole political fallout with the mob, with the Kennedys, and even the aliens as well, just to properly get your tinfoil hat on.
The kind of photos of her like body and autopsy photos, they're like mysteriously hard to get as well. So I've seen a couple. So as the lead coroner said, there was no bruises on her body, but the photos I saw, she's like really heavily bruised. But I'm not sure if they're like real or anything. There again, like it's hard to know what's actually real and what's fake in this, but there's no doubt she was involved with the brothers. There's no doubt she was part of a bugging operation by the FBI and the CIA as well. And some documents regarding her still classified. There's one that says her death is still like a security threat as well, which is really weird. Like, why after all this time?
Because at the end of the day, she was only an actress, wasn't she? Or at least that's what we're led to believe. So there's no real reason they should be
Yeah,
classified.
but that's still definitely a little bit of a smoking gun.
Adds
if
weight
she's
to
a
the president and
security
stuff, doesn't
threat,
it?
Yeah, I mean, she was always going to have like a scope on her as soon as she was just even involved with either one of those. But for it to carry on further and the extent to which it went on, I mean, like, I know a lot of people got bugged back then and had like wiretapping, like Martin Luther King. I mean, basically anyone famous was probably had their phones tapped. Like Hoover was notorious for that, but there's signs that the mob did this as well. And then with them linking in with the Kennedys, it's hard to know who did what, which is why I think it will go on forever, but ultimately never be solved either. Much like both Kennedy brothers' assassinations as well. One later in the decade and one the following decade.
Makes it such a great conspiracy theory then, which I think I might jump in with a rating if that's all right.
Yeah, be kind.
As for a first appearance, it's done really well. It's basically got all the hallmarks for classic co-conspirators, how we like to go through our conspiracies. It's a nice flow to it and really well researched. And when you just consider all the evidence we've presented, I'm going to give this one a solid 8.5 for a conspiracy theory overall.
Only the best for you.
Good if be standing in good stead for a further appearance down the line.
Thank you very much.
And the believability is there's certainly enough to make it seem very suspicious, given what maybe she knew and how involved she was with both Kennedys, etc., etc. And I just for that reason alone, and also the medical inconsistencies, I'm going to go slightly above average believability. I'm going for another 5.5. I think I'm just erring towards the fact that it wasn't suicide.
I'll gladly take that.
Yeah, I'll go now as well, and just thanks to you for coming on and giving us some of your top film insight. And it was a really well-researched theory. And I mean, I really enjoyed listening. And to be fair, I feel a bit shameful that I didn't know about Marilyn Monroe's relationship with JFK. It seems pretty common knowledge. And the fact that she was involved in Robert Kennedy, obviously, that made it even more interesting for me. So I'm going to go higher than Callum, actually. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 as a conspiracy. In terms of the believability, kind of going to link back a bit to what I said about Kurt Cobain. You mentioned she was depressed, anxious, lots of scandals in her life, was known for taking drugs, and, that's always red flag for suicide. But at the same time, you can't really look past the fact that she was in a relationship with JFK and Robert Kennedy and, easily could have got influence over those two to find out some information. I find it a bit far-fetched that, she was somehow involved with communists in Cuba or South America or whatever and feeding back information to them. But, I definitely believe she could have got hold of some information. Who for? I don't know. Maybe just for personal use. And obviously, if JFK, 10 minutes after nutting, realised, oh shit, I've just told us really classified information that she shouldn't know, he'd definitely worried about it.
I just love the scenario of him dropping the UFO Roswell thing 10 minutes later, realising, oh damn, I should not have said that.
And even if it's something that isn't really that important, but he's told her and, he's gone and bugged her and he's heard her, on the phone to her mum, he's probably arguably got no choice but to do something about it. And given the way she was, you could easily play it off as a suicide, given her depression and anxiety. So I'm also going to go slightly above average and give it maybe not slightly above average. I think the Kurt Cobain thing definitely had a bit more to it, and I gave that a 4.5. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10, but to be fair, that's probably higher than my personal average. So well done, Gia.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to echo the thoughts of the other two on this one. Really enjoyed this conspiracy. I think it would be a big enough and interesting enough conspiracy theory if it was just that, one of the most famous actresses of all time, Marilyn Monroe, didn't actually commit suicide. But then when you tie in all the other things about perhaps mafia involvement or obviously the political scandal with the president and his brother, it suddenly becomes huge. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 for the overall rating. And then believability, I mean, there's loads of details in there that certainly make you question it. You said about the levels being too high to have all been self-administered and, the lack of vomit and the strange findings in the colon in the autopsy. So all those things are a bit, they raise questions at the very least. I suppose you spoke about the housekeeper and saying that Robert was there the night of the death, but somebody who's a housekeeper, they might be a bit biased to Marilyn Monroe being on her payroll and all that. But I mean, it still can't be entirely discredited. There certainly were a lot of motives for her to be murdered in terms of it could have brought down the whole presidency. It would have been catastrophic for JFK not only to be having an affair with her, but then also, his brother's involvement as well. So I think there's certainly a lot of motive and reason for her to have been murdered. I suppose, as Luke said, you can never rule out these people who are in the spotlight so much and addicted to drugs and whatnot, actually just committing suicide. But I think there's enough that I'm going to give it above average, and I'm going to go for believability a 6 out of 10.
That's good stuff. Am I allowed to rate my own, or is that only available for full-time members?
Yeah, rate your own.
Yeah, so for the general theory, the quality of it, I think it's got all the elements of what we love as conspiracies, especially with the time frame as well, in the 60s. And I think, obviously, with JFK's and Robert's subsequent assassinations, this can somewhat be viewed as the starting point for that political intrigue. So I find it really entertaining, and stuff with the mob just interests me in general anyway. So I'm going to go an 8 for the quality of it. Believability, as you know, as a kind of skeptic of these things, I kind of think that there should be the burden of proof is on these people to prove it rather than saying discrediting the official story. So that's what lets it down for me. It's just too scattered. And maybe that's my own research, but there's like one thread in all of these things that's missing, even though they're all compelling arguments. It needs like that final bit of proof just to open new avenues. So for believability, I'm probably going to go for a 4 out of 10 as well.
Okay.
And yeah, well done on your first ever conspiracy presented.
Thank you. I think that's the most nervous I've been in my entire life.
Well, it didn't show.
Oh, the pressure's unbearable.
All right, cool. Thanks for that, George. And we'll now hand over to Luke for our second theory of the evening.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. Back to the conspiracy expert.
I knew there was going to be one dig in there
No, I'm
somewhere.
joking. So yeah, the theory I'm going to present is not anywhere near as well known as George's, or arguably not anywhere near as big, but I'm going to be presenting that the film Spotlight is a front. And so just to give a short synopsis of the film, it is about the Boston Globe newspaper's Spotlight team uncovering a pattern of sexual abuse by priests in Massachusetts and a cover-up of said abuse carried out by the Archdiocese of Boston.
Is that a spoiler or is that a synopsis? Just so we can give a warning.
It's based on a true story,
Okay.
so I can't really spoil it as such. But yeah, there's not really any spoilers as such.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I think priest being nonces is kind of a sort of open season, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely not a conspiracy
So,
theory.
No. So the team worked relentlessly to expose the Catholic Church and end up uncovering a massive network of paedophilia. The film, as I mentioned, is based on true proceedings, and the team that uncovered the abuse actually won the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service, which is one of America's highest journalism awards. What is actually remarkable about the team is that they found that 6% of priests in Boston were abusive to young children, and arguably this 6% doesn't include many that weren't caught or exposed. I think that's kind of phenomenal, because if that translates worldwide, there's 415,000 priests. 6% of this would be 25,000 priests abusing children. You can kind of see why they would want this covered up if this was the case. It would just totally destroy Catholicism.
Well, you'd
Not
think
special.
and hope.
But it wouldn't, would it? Because it's
Yeah,
blind
I mean-
faith.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. 6% is 1 in 18 churches. And I mean, we live in England where Catholicism isn't anywhere near the main religion, but there's still hundreds of Catholic churches. And yeah, the cover-up is a story for another episode. But for those who don't know, the reason that supposedly priests are more likely to abuse young children is because they're supposed to be celibate, which means they're never allowed to have sex. And quite like the incels of the world, this builds up frustration, which is why many commonly abuse young children, as they have both the access to young children and the young children's trust as they're supposedly speakers of God. Personally, I think that trivializes the issue, and I believe that individuals are simply just evil and disgusting. And the whole cover-up goes to show that religion is fundamentally flawed and often an excuse to get away with atrocities, but again, that is definitely for another episode. Anyway, back to the film. So as I mentioned, people argue that the film is a front from two perspectives. Number one is that it makes the media look trustworthy at a time when people's faith in the media was really dropping. I think on this front, it's kind of worth noting what you took from the film. I've seen the film, and I don't believe it always comes across this way. But then again, I'm not the greatest at properly analysing films. I think you've seen this film,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
George? Do you have any thoughts on this? Because I kind of think, if anything, it makes the media look a bit bad, as they were always kind of told to like put this story to one side and deprioritize the story.
It definitely doesn't glamorize the press, like maybe something like All the President's Men, which is like has a really romantic view of journalism. I think this kind of acknowledges that the people who worked on this are actually good people. But the editor
Then
in
the
particular,
whole-
so they knew early on that there were priests in Boston abusing children, but they kept the story under wraps because they knew it's like a drop in the ocean. It wouldn't do anything. They needed to find widespread abuse. So you have this conflict of like, well, what's right, or are we holding off? I mean, kids' lives were ruined by this, and some of the journalists were putting it off so they could get a bigger story. So I definitely don't think it like glamorizes the press in any way, really. I really think that's kind of unfair on the film.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you there, and that's why I was more drawn to the second perspective, and that's, if you pardon the pun, it takes the spotlight of the rampant paedophilia in Hollywood and the upper echelons of society, and by pointing such a big finger at Catholicism for paedophilia, and rightly so, of course, the film portrays Hollywood and the elites in general as exposing paedophilia and doing good, when in reality, I'm not sure it's too much up for debate. Hollywood has some very dark secrets and issues. Cough, cough, Harvey Weinstein and Roman Polanski. I would say personally, I thought this film was absolutely brilliant, and you should definitely check it out. It won the Best
I
Picture.
was just going to ask,
Oscar.
have you or have John or Callum seen it?
No,
No, I haven't
I've
actually.
heard the
Probably-
name. Didn't know what it was about.
doing the
I know
podcast.
John has a bad track record with my recommendations.
Well, one quick
Callum's
question.
normally all right.
Is it over 2 hours long? So that dictates whether John will watch it.
I can check. Does
Good
anyone
question.
want to explain it while I'm searching?
Much appreciated, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, our host John here cannot watch a film above 2 hours because apparently he just gets distracted. So
Which is almost ironic. Someone who does a lengthy podcast.
yeah, if it's 1 hour 59, he's
Yeah.
sorted.
Yeah.
You can watch most of it, but unfortunately, you're going to miss 9 minutes.
Oh,
Of,
well, then.
I mean, although some of that will be taken up by the credits, so it might be like 5 minutes, but you'll get the bulk of it in if you so wish.
When you say it's a film and you say it won the best picture Oscar, so it's not a documentary as such then?
It's like a biopic.
Yeah, it's just like a historical drama.
So is it based on real people or is it just based on
yeah,
the
yeah.
scandal as a whole?
No, it's based on real people.
It's based on real people, and they're like literally exposed like hundreds and hundreds of.
It's got quite a big cast. So you got Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber as well. So
I might check
yeah,
it out, to be fair.
it's really good.
So as I mentioned, it won the Best Picture Oscar above The Revenant and also The Big Short. And as an economist and a and as an economist and a huge Margot Robbie fan, I can definitely appreciate The Big Short genius. So it was no mean feat to beat it. However, many people say it was nowhere near Oscar worthy and only won as Hollywood wanted to shove this front down your neck. On paper, yes, a film that essentially just talks about a newspaper investigation into the Catholic Church doesn't really sound that enthralling, but it is a really informative, well-done film. Personally, I think the film is worthy, but I'm not a film nut and found The Godfather boring whilst enjoying many cheesy films, which is why, George, I'm going to pass over to you as the film expert. Do you think it deserved the Best Picture?
So if I was voting, because I think what people do with when it comes to Oscar year is, so the film that wins, and then obviously there's like 6 or 7 that don't, they go, well, what about that film that didn't win, or what about that film? And it's like, you can only pick one, right? Whatever one you think's the best one. So I probably would have voted for Big Short as well
Good lad.
in that year, but I think Spotlight would have been second. And I don't want to bore you with like Oscar facts or anything, but it was so it only won 2 Academy Awards that year. So it won Best Picture and Best Screenplay, and it's like the lowest amount of Oscars a film has won whilst winning Best Picture, which is due to like confusing stuff regarding changes in how they vote. So I think it was a surprise. I think The Revenant was the favourite that night to win. More your standard Hollywood affair. But as we were saying, we don't think it glamorises the press whatsoever. So I think it did enough to win.
By the sounds of the type of film it was, it doesn't sound like it would have won like Best Visual Effects or Best Original Score or anything anyway, just because of the nature of the film it was. So I don't think it's that surprising, is it, that it only won 2 Oscars?
Some were predicting it because it won like a precursor award at the Actors Guild, and that's normally a really good indicator for what wins the Oscar. So it was the second favourite going into the night, and some people were predicting it to win. I think it premiered at Toronto in the September before the Oscars in February, and as soon as it come out, it was the favourite to win like straight away. So it didn't come completely out of the blue, but I think it's actually a really quiet film. It's more done with like mood and subtlety rather than like big speeches or about like the truth and stuff like that we normally get in these kinds of films.
So I suppose that kind of discredits the theory that maybe this was pushed by Hollywood and kind of the Oscar was all bought and paid for. If you're saying that it certainly wasn't beyond the realm that it could win it on merit alone.
Yeah, so I do think it was naive because it was a very excellently well done film and was always going to be in the running. Some conspiracies do accept the film was excellently done with brilliant acting, directing, costume design, lighting, you name it, the film had it. They point to the fact if Hollywood was going to do this as a front, of course they'd make it good. They'd use their best people and they'd want to make it compelling and a good watch to maintain your attention to get the info out there. I think when conspiracists analyse this film, they are never denying the horrendous crimes from the Catholic Church, but instead saying these crimes were used by the industry to take the pressure off themselves. Kind of like, just push the idea that the Catholic Church are the elite paedophiles rather than Hollywood and take any pressure off Hollywood itself because they obviously have their own problems. So as well as this, the film also touches on how the team were told to deprioritize the inquest into the Catholic Church after the 9/11 attacks to a point where the investigation was almost dropped. However, they plow through, giving the perception the media really is a morally sound profession and will stop at nothing to expose bad. So I guess in some ways that's where this first front comes from, that, it glorifies the media. But it's kind of on a micro level rather than a macro level because it's individuals rather than the industry as a whole. Which
we should also add that the team that discovered this were not part of the main reporting team. They were like their own separate team who delve into like cold cases and like historical things. I think it's like a team of like 6 people who were in a basement in the Boston, is it the Herald or the Globe? I can't remember. Yeah. They very much weren't like the premier people at this newspaper. They were bottom of the barrel, really.
I suppose what you could be implying as well is that you think just feed into maybe a much wider conspiracy, just a potential for the media to control the narrative, so to speak, just like what is seen and what isn't seen. There's maybe offering a little bit of interesting insight into that, maybe just on this micro scale, but it could have a much larger implications.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, what's kind of funny about this theory is, given its real events, and they were told to deprioritize it after 9/11, even led some of the more diehard conspiracists suggesting the Pope and the Catholic Church carried out 9/11 to take since they being investigated. I think without doubt the Pope is a powerful man, and I think there's no doubt in my mind he played a part in covering up paedophilia within the Catholic Church rather than actually look at kind of fixing the issue. All I'll say on that front is, thank God big Henry VIII took England away from the Pope in 1534.
Just we are ruling out the possibility that the Pope decided to cross the bit of the divide between Catholicism and Islam to unite on a common front to take down the Twin Towers.
I'm not ruling it out.
Name a more iconic duo. I think the theory is certainly interesting, maybe not totally believable, because it was a good film, and I mean, if Hollywood were pushing this front, they would make it a good film. But to me, it just seems a bit unlikely that Hollywood would go to all this trouble, especially when you think of paedophilia, you instantly think of the Catholic Church anyway. So I'm not totally convinced this was needed.
Yeah, they've got that market cornered, should we say?
The paedophilia networks exposed by the paper and brought to light by the film, they're horrible, they're sickening and disgusting. But at the same time, I think it's something everyone had always known about in some way, shape or form. But it had never as such been recognised on a large scale or had much done about it. One thing I will say is, I know we're from England and there's a lot of jokes and propaganda at the expense of the Irish, which is a country that we still have big tensions with. And there are many complex reasons for this tension that we won't go into for now. But these tensions kind of boil down to the fact that Ireland is traditionally Catholic and England is traditionally Protestant. What I always found interesting is, many English comedy shows over the last 50 years or so had joked for years about Irish priests being paedophiles, years before its big exposure as such. So it was always something that people knew was happening, but it was never actually official.
The film does delve into that as well, even with the journalist, especially one of the characters. It implicates something like this shared silence, and that even the ones who exposed it deep down, they probably did know this was happening.
Even as a kid, I knew about it. You just see it on TV all the time, but I guess at the same time, everyone knew about it but never did it.
Yeah, I suppose it says one thing knowing about just it's going on, but actually exposing names and places, really brings it a lot more to the forefront in people's minds, rather than just being sort of out there. Now we've got hard facts backing it up. We've got confessions.
Seems like a common theme, doesn't it, in these kind of scandals? Everyone knew about Harvey Weinstein, everyone knew about Jeffrey Epstein. By the sounds of it, everyone knew about Jimmy Savile. But then it takes decades in most cases to really become main news.
Yeah, I think when people say, why didn't you come out at the time? I think that's such a naive thing to say, because, you're telling me that people wanted this to happen, that they were just okay with denying it or not exposing it for how many ever years. I think it's, without trying to get too deep about it, the fact that people are coming out now shows that there is progress to be made, and there will undoubtedly be a load of hypocrites who say, oh yeah, it's great that they're coming out when they were complicit in it. But if that's the price we have to pay with getting these people exposed, then I'm perfectly willing to have a few actors patronisers, so I can take that.
Yeah.
I imagine a world where none of this come out. It'd be horrible.
I think now it's still not there, but it's getting to the point where people are feeling more comfortable about being able to speak about these kind of things. So, as a conspiracy podcast, that is good news for us because it could expose more cases, but just in general it's great for the world because you can lock down these horrible people that abusing and young kids and everything like that.
Plus it just boils down to the nature of Hollywood, that we know how tight knit it is, and how the adage goes, if you would speak out about Weinstein you'd never work in the industry again. I imagine it's a very similar thing for the Catholic Church, and also just the fact if you don't have the evidence to back it up, it could just be dismissed as baseless claims, even though people are very much aware that it's probably going on.
Yeah, and Catholicism is absolutely ingrained in Boston. It's got a massive Irish population there as well. I think that is why it took so long, because that religion is the root. It underpins everything in that city in particular. So when people say, why didn't this come out? I mean, if people are saying that, watch the film and then you'll see why.
Yeah, I mean, definitely check out the film. And ending on a note, I think it does definitely seem to be taking a bit of a moral high ground for Hollywood, giving this film the Oscar for Best Picture and heavily promoting it. You know, a film that exposes these kind of issues whilst Hollywood itself is having their own issues. And I think this is conspiracy's main problem. Catholic Church is not the only organisation with this kind of problem, and by releasing a film that points a finger at them, it may shield Hollywood itself from getting exposed for the same problem. So, going to pass it over to you guys. What do you think?
I think as a theory overall, it's got quite a lot of layers. I think I'm almost going to kind of discard the first part of the theory that it was a front for painting the media in a better light. Particularly as, you know, the both of you have seen it say that isn't particularly the case in the film anyway. But certainly in terms of the kind of deflecting the spotlight away from Hollywood, I think, you know, it's a fascinating conspiracy that Hollywood themselves would actually make a film around the issue, but just in a different part of society, i.e. Catholicism, rather than within Hollywood, in an attempt to deflect blame from that same issue. Seems like a very risky game to me, to kind of shine the light on paedophilia when, in order to deflect from your own partaking in paedophilia. It seems a strange choice.
Only time will tell, but I mean, I can't really see an Oscar-winning film about what Harvey Weinstein did. You never know.
There will be one, maybe not anytime soon, but that film's going to come out.
Well, they would try and use like a self-congratulatory way, or we got it, we exposed them eventually, sort of thing.
Yeah, if it comes out in like 3 years, then I think many people would have a right to say, like, what are you doing? If it's like 30 years, where hopefully a lot of the people who helped him cover it up are long gone.
Sorry for the guy who has to play.
Then maybe they can get away with it.
Wonder what lengths of method acting they'll go for that.
Hope it's not to the point where it's like to get in the mind of a nonce. You have to be a nonce. I wonder if anyone goes that far.
I think Kevin Spacey will play the part.
Yeah, get him on board.
But yeah, back to my rating. I think I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10 for an overall conspiracy. That was a really interesting one. Believability, kind of for the reason, but it seems strange to shine the light on something you're trying to distract attention from. I'm struggling a little bit with it. It seems like a big lengths to go to, rather than just trying to cover it up within Hollywood in of itself, rather than by trying to deflect the blame onto something else. You can perhaps see why, to deflect attention from other things, because by the sounds of it, it was a huge film, as much as it seemed to pass me by personally. Obviously Oscar winning, so what better to be used as a attention deflector. But I think I'm struggling a little bit with the believability that it was made by Hollywood, for that purpose. So I'm going to go for a 3.5.
Following on, I guess, what I've alluded to earlier is that Hollywood has a tendency to be quite self-congratulatory when it comes to issues of, say, social justice, things, especially in very recent memory. What was that, the whole Imagine...
Yeah.
I can entertain the idea that Hollywood would want to pat itself on the back by pushing this to the forefront with the Oscars and what have you. Look at us, we're doing this really altruistic act of exposing paedophilia. We've made a great film about it. But at the same time, when they have got a lot of skeletons in their closet, to use a cliche, it could lead to some unsavoury questions being pointed back at them. So that sort of does bring my believability down a little bit. But for the overall conspiracy, again, it's really well researched. It does sound like a very interesting film. Both Luke and George offer some good insights onto it. So for that reason, I'm going to give the overall conspiracy a solid 7.5. Got the real world consequence as well, given it's very real events. Seems like they didn't exaggerate or overly dramatize things. But believability-wise, I do think it's quite hard to say for definite that the Hollywood plan to market themselves through praising a film that exposes paedophilia in the Catholic Church. And likewise, I'm not sure why Hollywood would be wanting to praise the media so much, even if there is a bit of a potential for conspiracies in there with manipulating reviews, etc., trying to tell you what to think. But that's a lot deeper like we said, for another time. So my overall believability, I'm going to go for a 4 overall.
Thank you very much, Callum. What was our film expert, George?
Yeah, so I've actually learned something because I hadn't heard of this theory before you said it. I think it's quite entertaining. We all kind of like ragging on Hollywood. Even people who are into film like ragging on Hollywood. Probably more so, actually. If we kind of know the business, we know the dirty tricks they get up to. So any opportunity to slander Hollywood, I'm all down for that. So I think for the quality of the conspiracy, I'll go with a solid 7.5 as well. For the believability, I'm going to disregard the newspaper one much for the same reasons as John. regarding the Hollywood angle, kind of grouping Hollywood together as a whole, like obviously it's made up through numerous production companies, and I genuinely find it hard to imagine a world where these production companies, so say Warner Brothers, Disney, 20th Century Fox, all come up with an idea and go, you know what, we'll all work together in harmony and we'll make this film for the good of this industry. If they all got in a boardroom and said, we all need to come together, or put it this way, they'd all say no, absolutely not. And then they'd all come up with their own versions of the story, because that's what Hollywood's like. And then they'd find a way and they'd go, oh, can we get an action scene in there or something? Especially Disney. Disney would do that. Can we get a chase sequence in where one of the priests is escaping on a jet, getting chased by the journalist, and he's in a jet as well. And then we can probably get Tom Cruise in it to fly the jet. This will be perfect. Sounds all right, actually. Top Gun 2. So for believability for me, I'll probably go with a 4.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm kind of echoing what you guys think. It's definitely not the most believable theory, but after weeks and weeks of having believable theory after believable theory, it's somewhat nice to have a little more far-fetched one for sure. As a theory overall, I mean, as someone who really enjoyed the Spotlight film, it was nice to find a theory about it. It's definitely an interesting one because, as Callum mentioned, it's got real-world consequences, and I mean, we all kind of know that Hollywood does have the same problem, maybe not on the same scale and not exactly the same as a Catholic Church, but they're definitely trying to cover it up and potentially would point the finger at the Catholic Church and shine the spotlight on them. So you're saying, oh, these guys are the elites doing it, it's all connected to them, it's got nothing to do with us. But I think George makes a good point at debunking it by saying these companies would never really work together on this. So yeah, as a theory, just because I enjoyed the film itself, I'm going to give it a decent score and go for an 8 out of 10. On believability, I think I find it a lot less believable than you guys did. I think it's just a fantastic story. And when you're kind of flicking through the Pulitzer Prize, and it definitely stands out, and it is a big story. It exposed one of the biggest paedophile networks of all time, and it's connected to an organization that is home to 1.5 billion people, I think, and the Pope's also one of the most famous guys in the world. So I think they were always going to make a film about it in one way or another, and it doesn't really glorify journalism any way, shape or form. So the scale now is just out there, what's a 1 and what's a 5? I'm kind of a bit lost because you do definitely have to reserve your 1s for, the most far-fetched.
I think my judgment was I used a 5 as it could go either way, sort of thing. I don't think I've really given higher than an 8, except for the Maxwell one and the Epstein one.
Yeah. I was being kind because I'm coming on here, but if you're going to slate your own theory, I'll drop it down to a 3 if you don't mind.
I think I'm going to go for a 3 as well. It's not believable to me in the slightest, but I'll entertain it slightly, and I mean, it's not as far-fetched as some of the crazy conspiracies, such as David Bowie being Kanye West in
Yes, so check out our music conspiracies episode if you haven't already for gems such as that one.
Yeah.
And that wraps up my conspiracy. Let's hear what you've got then, John.
Okay, thanks for that, Luke. So mine isn't so much a conspiracy theory as it is a curse. So any of you want to guess what it is if I'm talking about a film franchise with a curse associated with it?
Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Wallace and Gromit.
Final Destination.
No, none of those are right. Macbeth weren't a bad guess, to be fair.
It's not really a film, though, is it?
No, and also it couldn't be much further away from the actual film I'm on about. But I'll put you out of your misery. And it is the curse associated with the Superman franchise.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It does ring a bell to be fair.
Right, I'm glad to hear that. So, the Superman curse is an alleged curse that haunts the comic book character Superman. You couldn't have guessed by the name. Particularly, but not limited to, his film adaptations. The curse is well known, although you 3 seem to prove that that isn't the case, and has actually put people off playing the character. The curse has affected those playing Superman, but also those involved in Superman productions behind the scenes. So the main curse comes from typecasting. The actors become so closely associated with the character of Superman that they struggle to find work playing any other character. So a similar example would be like Daniel Radcliffe, who will always be known as Harry Potter, regardless of what other films he appears in. I know we're all big fans of Woman in Black.
Try and name 5 films he's been in post Harry Potter.
Yeah.
As no one calls him Daniel Radcliffe either, everyone just calls him Harry Potter. I can't think of many other actors that you can say the same about.
Speak for yourself. I'll refer to him as Daniel Radcliffe.
I mean, I don't. If I saw him on the street, I'd be like, oh my God, there's Harry Potter. I think most people would, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
think I would.
Would you do it with like Alan Rickman as well then, or do you just call him Snape?
Yeah, I'd be like
Nah,
Severus.
well, I mean,
have a pick.
Obviously he's dead, but
Alan Rickman's definitely Alan Rickman. That'd be so disrespectful.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, other than typecasting, there's also a few far more serious cases of the curse striking. And I'm going to give you basically a whistle-stop tour of some of the incidents associated with the Superman curse. So the kind of structure of this conspiracy is going to be different to the others and to the ones we've done in previous episodes. Where I'm basically almost going to give you a timeline of actors and events that have happened associated with Superman. So firstly, Kirk Allen, who played Superman in 2 low-budget 1940s serials, after his time as Superman ended, he failed to find any work because of typecasting. He went on to do some low-paying voiceover work, commercials and uncredited screen roles, but he didn't really have any major roles after that. He then later appeared as Lois Lane's father in the 1978 Superman film, but sadly shortly after was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and died years later.
I think this is causation and correlation. Is that the team just picked some rubbish actors?
I thought you were just going to say, with that point, almost that it was coincidence, but I suppose save that to the end because there's obviously
there's quite a few more. There's one famous one as well. That I'm
yeah,
sure
there's a
we'll
very
mention.
famous one.
What about Henry Cavill?
Well, it hasn't struck yet.
It depends if you think.
coming up.
Depends if you think the that
Justice
moustache
League
out
must-
of
yeah,
Mission Impossible was like a curse or not.
So the second example was Bud Collyer, who voiced Superman in a cartoon from 1941 to 1943. While he enjoyed a career in TV, hosting the game show To Tell the Truth, he died fairly young. He returned to Superman by voicing the New Adventures of Superman in 1966, but died 3 years later, aged 61. We then move on to George Reeves, who played Superman in the 1951 film Superman and the Mole Men. He also starred in the television series Adventures of Superman. Again, he became too closely associated with the Man of Steel to get any other work. On the 16th of June 1959, just days before he was due to get married, Reeves was found dead with a gunshot wound at his home. His pistol was found near him, and his death was ruled as a suicide, but there's still controversy around the death. Reeves' fingerprints were never found on the gun, and he'd been having an affair with the wife, MGM exec Eddie Mannix, leading many to believe he may have been murdered. And it was actually Reeves' death that spurred on the conspiracy theories and the term the Curse of Superman. Christopher Reeve, who played Superman and Clark Kent in the Superman films Superman the Movie, Superman 2, Superman 3, and Superman 4, is probably the most famous example of the curse. Again, he was so linked with the character that it was difficult for him to get a lead in any of the films, and he mostly starred in those Superman sequels and supporting roles. Then tragedy struck. He was paralysed from the neck down after being thrown from his horse in a cross-country equestrian riding event in 1995. Reed then lived out the next 20 years, being unable to move and in a wheelchair, and died in 2004 from heart failure stemming from his paralysis. Like I said, this is certainly the most famous example of the curse.
I've definitely heard of that one. Now you've mentioned that.
Have you never heard of the George Reeves one?
No, I genuinely haven't. I mean,
Yeah,
it's surprising.
it's
There's
like-
another suicide. It's not suicide. Another running theme of this podcast.
that was the one I was referring to when I said earlier.
Yeah, they're the
It's
two
like the one I
I'd heard of.
associate with it. Yeah.
And then just topping off Christopher Reeve's one, his widow also died of lung cancer despite never smoking at the age of 44. A shorter one now, Lee Quigley, who played Superman as a baby in the 1978 film, died aged just 14 in 1991 as a result of solvent abuse.
Solvent abuse
Oh,
at 14.
I know, it's mad.
Well, when you get a role that big at the age of 0, you know, it gets you ahead of it.
Yeah. The next one we've got is Robert Ridgely, who voiced Superman in a series called Super Friends and had an extensive career in cartoon voiceovers, but again, sadly died of cancer at age of 65. Next one we've got, and I'm hoping you've heard of this actor, called Marlon Brando, who
No,
played...
never heard of him.
Luke probably hasn't.
Yeah.
Who played Jor-El in the 1978 Superman film, but he mainly gets a mention in this because of his private life. Again, he's a character associated with Superman in a Superman film, but he had quite a troubled private life. So his son, Christian, shot his half-sister Cheyenne's boyfriend in 1990, and he was in prison for 10 years. And Brando admitted in court that he'd failed his son and daughter, and his daughter then killed herself in 1995, and Brando then became a recluse in his later life. He died in July 2004, just 3 months before Christopher Reeve. And he also has a posthumous appearance in Superman again, thanks to some stock footage. So Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane opposite Christopher Reeve, suffers from intense bipolar disorder. In 1990, she sustained serious injuries in a car accident that left her paralyzed, and she later had a highly publicized manic episode of nervous breakdown in 1996. She went missing for several days and was found by the police in a paranoid delusional state. Now, funnily enough, Kidder has actually stated that she doesn't believe in the curse and that it's all newspaper-created rubbish. However, Kidder died in 2018 in what was ruled a suicide by drug overdose.
Just to clarify, Kidder doesn't have a conservatorship arrangement, does she?
Not as far as we're aware.
What are they feeding on the set?
I know.
Kryptonite.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Maybe it's real.
So, next example of the curse is we've got Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who are the writer and artist who co-created Superman. And their kind of first part of the curse is that they sold the rights to Superman for $130, which would only be worth about $2,000 today. And the Superman franchise has gone on to make billions. There have been repeated attempts by them to recover legal ownership of the character, and eventually they did end up gaining credit and a share, but it was a long time coming. Shuster's worsening eyesight, again part of the curse allegedly, prevented him from drawing and creating any of the characters. He worked as a delivery man in order to earn a living. The CEO of the company who bought the rights to Superman called one day, gave him a visit, and gave him $100, telling him to buy a new coat and find a new job because he was not going to create any more characters. Seems a bit harsh.
That's very harsh.
Yeah.
I suppose you say you sold the rights to the name, arguably the greatest name for any superhero ever, Superman. You sold those rights for $130.
Yeah, the name and the image.
I don't know how you can think this is a good arrangement. Because...
In addition to this one, by 1976, Shuster was almost completely blind and living in a nursing home. His writing partner Siegel launched a campaign again, protesting against DC Comics' treatment of him and Shuster. This story does have something of a happy ending, as DC's parent company Warner Communications added the two to the credits for the character, but this was 30 years later, and did give them a lifetime pension of $20,000 a year. The first comic that was restored with the new credits was Superman 302 in 1976, but they both died shortly after that, Siegel and Shuster. The next one we've got is two brothers, Max and Dave Fleischer of Fleischer Studios, who were the producers for the early Paramount Superman cartoons. The two of them, once they got involved in Superman, began to quarrel with each other, and the studio suffered financial disaster. They sold Paramount Studios for a loss, and then both found themselves in poverty for the rest of their lives, one of them dying because of his poverty. Next one we've got is on the Superman Returns DVD. 3 people involved in producing the DVD suffered injuries. One fell down a flight of stairs on his way to the set. Another was mugged on his way to the set and beaten up. And then a third was smashed into a glass window on the set.
Could have done with
all in the same day because of one DVD copy.
Yeah, it is strange because the director, Bryan Singer, said at the time after these incidents that my DVD crew absorbed the curse for us. So I'm not sure what he means by like a DVD crew, just the people making the DVD. Don't know how there was a set for that. But yeah, 3 of those had quite serious injuries. So yeah, short and sweet one, that wraps it up. So do you think all of these tragedies associated with the Superman franchise are a coincidence, or is it something out of this world?
You've missed a big one off, haven't you?
I don't know, have I? I might have done.
There's 2 I was thinking of. You mentioned Bryan Singer, who made Superman Returns. Obviously, that starred Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor as well, both of whom have since been done for, shall we say, potentially illegal activity with minors. So,
yeah.
And carrying on from the kind of spotlight stuff as well. That's apt. I'm not just like throwing it in there for like, we can say it's relevant to this and what we discussed earlier as well.
I think I think it's another example. That with the curse, yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying that the curse caused them to have those perversions.
Yeah, I think they'd like that. I think they'd like to attribute it to that.
Will that stand up in court, though?
So what's your defence? Superman curse, innit?
Say no more, you're free.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to go into some ratings? I suspect you all fall on the side of coincidence, but there was a lot there. There's a lot more than I ever thought there were.
Yeah,
what do you reckon?
I'll start. I think it's a really interesting one, and it's something that you might start to worry about. And I think it'd be interesting to hear if anyone's actually turned down the role after.
They have. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because some people are very superstitious, and I mean, to be fair, like, not personally a big believer in curses, but there's there's certain things that just make you question it. Like the Tutankhamun curse just seems like crazy, and I mean this one's got a lot to it as well. Where it goes with the future Supermans, some of the more modern ones, be interesting to see. So I'm looking forward to the next 50 years or so to see if Henry Cavill has a downfall or a sudden passing.
Say he does. Say he's found dead.
Yeah, overall,
in the next week. Would you
that
get
was
creeped out by that?
I'd be very creeped out just having done this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm
You
still
say something,
maintaining that Tash is enough. That's like he's paid his dues.
He
Having it,
sacrificed himself.
I mean,
Yeah,
just
that's
the
his
cinematic
one.
universe isn't enough of a mess as it is, with that curse or not. I just throw a curse on top of it just to make things even worse for them. I suppose when you get the actual actors and actresses referencing the curse as being part of their decisions not to take on the role, that does make you think, there could be something to it.
But yeah, John, I think it's a really good theory, and researched a lot and found a lot of different people from the franchise. And yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 as a conspiracy. In terms of believability, it's really through no fault of your own, but I mean, curses and stuff like that, I'm just never really going to believe, no matter how much evidence you could provide. So it's going to score quite low for me. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm not going to have any complaints about that. Callum, what do you reckon?
I suppose in the nature of being typecast, that is a genuine fear for a lot of actors, especially when you're mentioning some of the smaller ones where they're not on these really lucrative projects, like with Daniel Radcliffe and Harry Potter. He could arguably never work a day in his life and financially completely sound, just living off the 7 films he's already done. But if you're just doing Superman on a TV series run or something like that, you are going to be worried about finding your next work. So that might be just new thing. You can become so synonymous with one character, no one wants to place you to just see Superman. But I suppose as the maybe believability goes, it would be a lot more believable if all of the unfortunate incidences were of the same making, or all just very similar suspicious deaths or something like that. Then I'd really be thinking, okay, there's a genuine curse here. But because it does seem to be a sort of assorted collection of incidents with no real theme apart from having worked on Superman in some shape or form, it does bring the believability down for me. Really, it was interesting to find out just how many people have been plighted as a result of being working on one of the most enduring cinematic characters of our generation, and probably for generations to come, given how Hollywood loves to just recycle and recycle characters of different iterations in our cinematic universes. So for an overall conspiracy, I'll give it a 7.5. But yeah, the believability, as Luke alluded to, it's quite hard to really believe in the supernatural or anything like that. So I'll say a 3. I think there's some things that maybe have a little bit more weight than the other incidences. Like, say, typecasting could be a genuine thing.
Thank you very much. George?
I quite like the idea of curses. It's quite intriguing. And I knew of the Reeve, and then Kidder one as well. But the others I didn't know so much about. So the extent of this curse goes like way further than what I thought. So for that reason, I'm going to go reasonably high on the overall thing. I'll probably go with a 7.5. And then for the believability, considering like the length of time that Superman's been around, I think it's been around since like the 30s. Naturally, you're going to have so many more people involved with productions. It's like Macbeth as well, so there's like a famous curse regarding Macbeth, especially with like the stage plays. Macbeth is going to be like one of the most performed plays out there, so naturally there's going to be more chance for accidents and weird circumstances to happen. So that definitely does bring it down for me, so I'll probably go with a 3 out of 10.
Okay, cool. So I'll quickly rate it myself. Kind of to echo what George says, when I was looking into this one, there was so much more thought there would be. You know, just so many people who have died at a far younger age than you would expect the average person to, and often in not the best of circumstances, whether it be their lives seemingly going off a cliff in terms of drug overdoses and, you know, like paranoid episodes and breakdowns and things like that, as well as obviously a couple of suicides and a murder. So yeah, I thought it was interesting, and a lot of them all like occurred either on set, or like during filming, or shortly afterwards, which I suppose adds a bit of weight to it. So for the overall conspiracy, I'm going to go with a 8.5. Quite enjoyed this one, and it makes a nice change, going something a bit more maybe paranormal. In terms of the believability, I think it could almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy that people go onto set hearing about the Superman curse, and it puts them a bit more on edge, and it maybe makes them more prone to accidents and falls and things like that. So yeah, I think again in terms of believability, not a great believer of curses or the paranormal for that matter. But as Callum touched on, I think the typecasting is for a role like that is going to be a very real problem. And then the idea of that self-fulfilling prophecy and people maybe being very wary of it and being put off or being very conscious of it and then attributing things that happen to the curse. I'll go believability. I'll give it a 4. Right, so I will hand over now to Callum.
Right, thanks for that, John. My theory suggests that Steven Spielberg's 1978 film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, was actually informed by classified information from the US government pertaining to real-life UFO incidents. Has anyone seen it? I'm sure George must have as well.
I haven't.
You haven't
To my
seen
shame.
it? You
To
haven't
my
seen
shame,
it?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen it.
John might have seen the first 2 hours, missed the final 17 minutes.
I haven't even got that far. So
I doubt it.
Right, so I guess I'm the only one who's seen it as a fan of science fiction.
I've heard of it, if that's any consolation.
I'd be very surprised if you hadn't. So yeah, the name Close Encounters of the Third Kind references US astronomer and UFO researcher Joseph Allen Hynek's scale for classifying sightings of unidentified flying objects. An encounter of the third kind is the highest degree of the scale, referring to a UFO encounter in which an animated entity is present that seems to be the occupants or pilots of a UFO. So the aforementioned Joseph Hynek plays a central role within this so-called conspiracy, which exposes a top-secret US government operation known as the Serpo Exchange Program, and how this may tie into one of the most iconic science fiction films of all time. It is worth noting that the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind is deemed as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the US Library of Congress, and was chosen for preservation in said library. Before we get into the bulk of the conspiracy, I'll start by offering a brief synopsis of the film. As we established earlier, I don't think any of you have seen this, so it is a spoiler warning. Although it has been out for about 40 years, so you should be at least aware of some of the overarching elements. So the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind centers around Roy Neary, a middle-class American who develops an obsession after encountering a UFO, which was apparently controlled by intelligent beings from outer space. The aliens implanted the mysterious vision in Neary's mind, which becomes the central focus of his obsession. There's a scene where he's trying to recreate this using mashed potato. It's just taking over his life and alienating him from his family.
That's a good pun.
I was going to say, is that intentional?
That was not intentional. We've been researching aliens for so long, it's almost subconscious. Accompanied by Gillian Guyler, a woman whose son has been kidnapped by the aliens, Neary pursues his vision to Devil's Tower, an incredible mountain formation in Wyoming. There, they witness the first physical contact between a team of UFO investigators and the alien visitors. Dozens of UFOs appear from in the night sky, which the scientists attempt to contact through the use of light and sound from a large electrical billboard that is being controlled by a synthesizer. The score for this film is iconic as well, done by the great John Williams, especially the 5-note little motif that's used as part of this first contact.
I didn't know he did the score for this. It seems like he does the score for every big film.
You've worked a lot with Spielberg. So after these UFOs leave, an enormous mothership lands at the site, releasing Gillian's son and other abducted beings from throughout history. As the aliens finally emerge from the mothership, the government officials include Roy in a group of potential travelers to join the mothership. Neary is selected by the aliens and leaves with them on the mothership, but not before the aliens make one final contact with the scientists before flying off into the realms of outer space. So how does this link to top-secret government operations and UFO research? Spielberg himself has said that the inspiration from the film came from a childhood memory of seeing a meteor shower in New Jersey. But throughout the production process, Spielberg consulted with the aforementioned UFO researcher Hynek, who worked on the US government project Blue Book, a systemic study on UFOs that lasted from 1952 to 1969. Project Blue Book was designed to scientifically analyze UFO data from reported sightings and determine whether extraterrestrial activity presented a threat to national security. It is worth noting that Hynek began his tenure as a firm UFO skeptic, but grew disenfranchised with the bureaucracy, finding that research into seemingly genuine UFO sightings was severely lacking. He began to publicly disagree with conclusions presented by Blue Book, especially when said conclusions were subject to derision by members of the public and UFO enthusiasts alike. So the US government became quite lazy, just dismissing everything without really giving any thought whatsoever, and this angered Hynek.
Now you can see why Marilyn Monroe was so eager to learn about these incidents.
Funny you should mention that. Certain members of your conspiracy do crop up in my ones. There's a crossover there potentially.
Look who he's cropped up again.
Exactly. So while there is no doubt that Project Blue Book is a verified government operation, theorists believe that Hynek was privy to more sensitive information that was not known to the public, specifically information pertaining to Project Serpo that Spielberg used to inform his film. So I'll pose the question, has anyone heard of Project Serpo?
For the sake of this, no.
Right.
No, I haven't either.
Well, prepare yourselves. Prepare to learn something, that's for sure. Project Serpo is the anonymous recounting of a top-secret US government exchange program existing between 1965 and 1978. This archive represents the accounts of 6 defense intelligence agents, part of a mission where 12 US military personnel traveled to Serpo, a planet in the Zeta Reticuli.
Already.
Right. A planet in the Zeta Reticuli system. The inception of this program dates back to the Roswell incident of 1947, which it claims was caused when 2 UFOs crashed into each other over the New Mexico desert. This crash yielded several casualties, as well as one surviving extraterrestrial, which was taken to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for study and named EBE-1 for Extraterrestrial Biological Entity 1. EBE-1 was reported to be calm and friendly, and quickly learned English.
It was renamed DP.
I just want to ask about the 2 UFOs crashing into
Yeah.
each other. Imagine that. So, say for argument's sake that these are the first 2 UFOs to ever come down to Earth, and then they crash into each other. Oh, what the fuck? What are the odds of that?
I guess New Mexico's an extraterrestrial hotspot.
Do you think these 2 separate spacecrafts as well, the drivers or pilots or whatever, are like humans when they crash as well, where they're just swearing at each other or something? So, look where you going.
Unfortunately, I don't think there would have been much of an argument, considering that there's only one survivor, which was EBE-1. The other 6, they recovered 6 other bodies.
I just always thought there was only one found, because I've seen the alleged pictures of it. They're just stereotypical alien. But yeah, I didn't know they found 6 bodies.
So I think this is just exclusive to this particular theory or set of documents.
Oh, okay.
But the general line of thought is there's just one spacecraft that crashed, which is probably maybe a little bit more believable than 2 UFOs being in the exact same area of the New Mexico desert and managing to crash into each other.
They could have gone together as a pair.
It's in the desert as well.
I think the thing is as well with that whole situation is fair enough if they were there in 1947 then you wouldn't see them, but nowadays I think if UFOs came down commonly enough to crash over, I mean they'd have definitely been spotted by now.
Yeah,
The
there'd
desert
be
then.
video.
Well, there was
No,
one
there
in
is
Brazil
video of them,
recently.
isn't there? Yeah. Have you seen that? If that's
I
real,
saw
that is the most mental thing I've ever seen.
I saw the video, yeah. It's pretty mental.
The thing that makes it more realistic to me is there's loads of different people's video of it from different angles and stuff, but it's generally terrifying.
I suppose just to go to the complete other angle, if there were UFO sightings today, you think the technology you have, it's so much easier for someone to fake something and make it look a lot more genuine than it would, say, in 1940s when UFO sightings were much more commonplace in the news, I think.
I think that's always going to be the problem if there legitimately is one nowadays. Everyone just thinks it's been CGI.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
UFO sightings seem to have gone out of public interest, really, when there's...
They're so 20th century, mate.
Yeah, well...
Go
But
with
they
the
can
times.
always be explained by something boring. That's the issue with it.
As I said, EBE-1 was calm and friendly, and he claimed to hail from the
What does
planet...
that mean? Carbon friendly?
Do you think he said carbon or calm?
Carbon, yeah.
Calm.
Calm.
I was thinking he's all electric or something. What? Oh, you're saying calm?
Calm
Yeah,
and
I
friendly.
thought you said carbon.
Yeah.
I wasn't doubting it. I was just, Project Serpo. I'll go along with it.
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's an enemy of the carbon. Right, so EBE-1 was calm and friendly,
Right, that makes a lot more sense.
claiming to hail from the planet Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli system, which is around 40 light years away from Earth. Trying to use equipment from his crashed ship, EBE-1 was unable to establish contact with his home planet before his death in early 1952. Miraculously, the US Army was able to succeed where EBE-1 failed, contacting the planet in December of that same year. Over the
Seems
following...
legit.
Yeah.
If miraculously was ever correctly used, that was the sentence.
Over the following 9 years, communications arranged an exchange program between Earth and Serpo. 12 astronauts, 10 men and 2 women were selected, and approval was gained from President John F. Kennedy for the exchange, which took place on the 16th of July 1965. Yeah, maybe Marilyn Monroe did know more than she was able to let on about exchange
EB1,
programs.
mate.
Yeah.
She shagged him as well.
Yeah.
So on that date, the aliens known as Ebens, from EBE-1 I imagine, visited Earth, picked up the humans and dropped off a single Eben to remain on Earth. I'll say that for more details about the mission, check out the website serpo.org, which does host a wealth of information detailing the program. And there's hundreds of pages of interviews and stuff from these so-called leaks. It's either one of the most brilliant works of fiction, or someone has made a genuinely shocking discovery and wants to share it with the rest of the world. The US knows a lot more about extraterrestrials than they'd like to let on.
I don't think that's up for debate.
No,
Maybe communicating with them right after they've crashed.
Yeah,
It's a
when
bit,
the alien couldn't as well.
it's a bit
Yeah.
implausible, I'd say.
and the alien
49.
learned English.
Yeah. He just comes out of the crash and so, oh, fucking hell, that really hurt.
And what would you do? You got that team, the first responders, dispatched there to keep things hush-hush, and it just comes out with a Cockney accent or something.
I think it'd put you at ease a bit more. You wouldn't be anywhere near as scared.
Yeah, I think it would. You know, he's a bit of a geezer, this one.
So just some brief details of the mission, which lasted for 13 years. So notable observations include 10-month journey time to travel to 40 light years. The planet Serpo had 2 suns and an 107-degree temperature, and the civilization was described as primitive yet scientifically advanced.
So were you saying people on Earth travelled about 50 times the speed of light?
If this theory is to be believed, yes, that's what happened.
Christ.
So it's like warp speed from Star Trek.
Yeah, that's time travel speed.
There's supposed details of the physics used to take the humans to Serpo. Apparently, NASA were able to reverse engineer some of the antimatter technology used in the alien spacecraft. There's also alleged use of wormholes as well to facilitate the space travel, but whether that's scientifically accurate or not, that's up for debate. And they also claim that the Serponians, let's call them, had anti-gravity vehicles, yet also like to do farming and other sort of more
This sounds
rural
like woefully mundane. You said they're like primitive yet scientifically advanced. So it's like they've got all this technology and they're like growing some fucking carrots or something.
Yeah, that
Gotta have a
feels-
hobby.
Yeah.
I don't know what they'd eat up there, but like, imagine that. Imagine if you go all that way. Imagine if we actually finally discover aliens. You go up there and all they're doing is just like farming or something. It's
Yeah.
like Minecraft. But like that was a fucking waste of time.
Apparently, the food on Serpo tasted like paper, according to these recounts.
Farming, an alien of your talents.
2 astronauts died in transit from overexposure to radiation. 2 elected to remain on Serpo, and the 6 that returned to Earth have all died, the last in 2002.
Do they have names?
Not that I was aware of. I think that's pretty classified as well.
So redacted.
Exactly.
They leave all the alien stuff in, but they hide the name.
Exactly. They're like, we'll call the alien EB1.
But it's believed that President Ronald Reagan was briefed on the mission by then CIA detective William Casey, but of course no transcripts exist that detail this meeting in May 1981, and official communications with Serpo were ended in 1985. So how does this link to Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Well, theorists have highlighted strong similarities between the final scene of the film and the accounts contained within the Project Serpo leaks. As mentioned earlier, 12 astronauts, 10 men and 2 women, were recruited for the mission. When contact was made with the mothership in Close Encounters, the film also featured 12 prospective astronauts who had joined the extraterrestrials, specifically 10 men and 2 women.
What came first, the film or the theory?
If you believe the timeline, the actual mission took place in 1965, the film was in 1977, and the leaks were released in 2005.
I just wonder if the theories just kind of based the Project Surf on the actual film.
That's a good point. That's a good shout. I didn't actually think about that at all. But I think the main thing linking the theory to the film is the scientist Hynek, who works on Project Blue Book and is believed to have worked on more secretive government operations a la Project Serpo. So furthermore, after the protagonist Roy boards the mothership, 1 alien remains in the hangar to communicate with the scientists via sign language, which could potentially reference that 1 alien that the Ebens left behind on Earth as part of the exchange. So alternate takes on the film have suggested that Close Encounters of the Third Kind was a result of cooperation between Spielberg and the US government. Given the prevalence of reported UFO sightings and so-called close encounters, the aim was to produce a project designed to get the public used to the idea of friendly aliens. In fact, the account that leaked the supposed reports of Project Serpo has alleged that, after President Ronald Reagan watched a special screening of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he privately spoke to Spielberg and said, "You don't know how true this really is." Yeah.
I thought the theory was it was based on it.
Well, there's a lot of elements to this theory, I'll say that much.
I just want to mention they wanted to do it for the notion of being a good alien. So this was in 77. 79, Alien come out. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I'm sure you all know what happened. You know,
I say the
so-
alien's not very friendly.
yeah, all this good work's and done by that pesky xenomorph.
Yeah, I suppose when you consider basically every single Alien film prior to Close Encounters, always depicted them as being tyrannical overlords wanting to take over the Earth and wipe out human race.
Spielberg's absolutely raging at the premiere of Alien. He sort of put all this goddamn work in.
That's why I made E.T.
Yeah, well, that's like a repair job. That's like 82.
Exactly, trying to make it
Yeah.
friendly again.
Exactly.
Give them Ridley Scott has to go and do Aliens 2.
James Cameron did Aliens, not Ridley
I
Scott.
don't think it's
just,
Prometheus,
yeah, he did Prometheus, yeah.
and basically tried to cock everything up from that point onwards.
Controversial.
Alien Covenant.
But yeah, this would not be the first time that conspiracy theorists have highlighted collusion between Hollywood and the US government, with the most prominent incidents being the belief that the US government recruited acclaimed director Stanley Kubrick to fake the moon landing footage. So this is
That
a
definitely
really...
happened, by the way. Obviously, I wasn't on that podcast, but that 100% happened. And
Yeah.
when I said that in because I did a module on Kubrick when I was at university, and they said, "What was your favourite Kubrick film?" And I said the moon landings. Safe to say, it didn't go down well, and then I got escorted out by some shady men.
Some men in black.
Yeah, I did have a bit of a fuzzy memory after it, I must say.
So again, saying it's a really interesting conspiracy, if you even believe it's as much a conspiracy, which goes so far to suggest that Kubrick used his film The Shining to confess to his involvement with NASA via a series of visual and story-based clues. So do check out our moon landings episode if you haven't already. But back to the theory. When asked about the film, Hynek, the astronomer and UFO researcher, said that even though the film is fiction, it's based for the most part on the known facts of the UFO mystery, and it certainly catches the flavour of the phenomenon. And we even went so far as to say that Spielberg put his career on the line. This assertion is backed up by Spielberg himself, who revealed that both the US Air Force and NASA declined to cooperate on the film. In a 1978 interview for the Cinema Papers magazine, Spielberg revealed that NASA sent him a 20-page letter warning him that releasing Close Encounters was dangerous, and that this letter was the point where he, Spielberg, quote, found his faith with the project. And he then followed this up by saying that if NASA took the time to write me a 20-page letter, then I knew there must be something happening. So I think the reason for this letter is believed to be based upon the idea that Spielberg's previous work, Jaws, had increased the public's fear of shark attacks and feared a similar endemic of UFO sightings following the film's release. While such revelation may disprove the notion that Close Encounters of the Third Kind is an elaborate government public information film, it doesn't rule out the more outlandish allegations that the US government has made contact with alien life and went as far as sending a team of astronauts on a 10-year mission to the Zeta Reticuli system.
Can I just say, what was NASA's letter complaining about? That it would turn public opinion against aliens?
No, he never actually said what the letter contained. I think it's more just expressing that the project was dangerous, maybe because it might reveal government secrets or something like that, or what they believe is Spielberg's fiction might have actually been a bit closer to the truth than Spielberg would like to let on.
Maybe they gave him edits for the script. They said that didn't happen, but this did.
Wouldn't be the first time, I suppose, government involvement in film to protect their secrets.
Is that Spielberg thing true?
What, the letter?
Yeah, has he said that?
It's definitely been said in a magazine. The magazine's since been discontinued, but this has been reported in his biography. And maybe he's making up the story, I guess, or maybe making a story about getting the letter, but the interview definitely happened.
That is a bit odd. Don't know why they'd say that.
Yeah, definitely a 20-page letter as well. That's got to be containing some serious, allegations, I guess.
6 pages could have done. 20 is a bit overkill, I think.
Pity the poor bugger had to type it all out.
Oh, God. I mean, he makes, one error, and he's got to do it again. It's EB1, not like EM1.
It's not DT. Spielberg hasn't done that one yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you have to reevaluate Spielberg's, filmography as well. So anything he's done with aliens since. So E.T., are we now assuming that it was a kid in a suit, wasn't it? So they say. But are we now of the opinion that it was actually a real alien?
Yeah, they also alleged that the aliens used at the end of Close Encounters were children in suits, but what do we know? Could be some E-bins they managed to harvest.
Distant relatives of main man EB1.
Anyway, think about Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Could that be more Ebens in their mothership?
Exactly. Although, how did the Close Encounters ones, if the aliens at the end, how do they get down to Earth without crashing? Because that's all they seem to do when they come down here.
It was a very big mothership they appeared in as well, and it's also a scene in the film of them looking like they were joyriding down some US country roads, some UFOs blasting down the street with no regard for speed limits.
Just disrespect.
Can you imagine being fine to travel 40 light years in 10 months, but struggling to navigate a free airspace over New Mexico?
I suppose that maybe if you think about how Lightspeed in Star Wars, where it's just press a button, like go and play some space chess.
Yeah, you just press go, don't you, and then push the lever.
Yeah.
They might have to do like a 3-point turns or anything like that up there.
And that might be the thing that confused them. They didn't realise, we've actually got to use the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to wrap this up, whether you think that Project Serpo was a genuine government project or not, there's no denying the cultural impact that Spielberg's film has had. In 1979, the UK House of Lords staged a 3-hour debate on UFO sightings and alien abductions, but ultimately concluded that UFOs pose no threat to the nation. The full transcript of this meeting can be found online, but I will recount one of the summarising points. As the noble Earl, Lord Halsbury said, scientists are rightly inquisitive people. If there was anything in the stories of UFOs, we would expect the scientific community as a whole to be devoting much effort to studying or to making contact with supposed aliens. But the idea of a conspiracy of silence by this and other governments belongs, I suggest, to the world of James Bond. So, James Bond or not, this is a fascinating case that could confirm UFO sightings dating back as far as the infamous Roswell incident in 1947. Did Spielberg's relationship with UFO researcher Joseph Allen Hynek expose him to official government UFO secrets that inspired his work Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Secondly, and no doubt a much more credible theory, were the reports contained in the Project Serpo files factual? Has extraterrestrial activity transcended these Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Over to you guys. Does anyone believe that aliens exist?
I'll start overall as a theory. It's probably one of the funniest we've had because of how outlandish it was in places. And just the thought that NASA have had all this contact with aliens and are aware of aliens and have such high-end technology. And so what do they decide to do with this information? They decide to plough millions of dollars into making a film. It seems like a very odd choice. But yeah, I did enjoy this theory. I'm going to give it an 8 overall. In terms of believability, on the first one that NASA kind of worked with Spielberg on it, maybe asked him to do it, I think it's almost undone by itself, that theory, and the fact that Spielberg said he had the letter condemning the film. I think believability on that. I mean, it could happen, I suppose, if we believe the Kubrick moon landings that he worked with government to make it. If you take that as read, then perhaps it isn't unheard of. But I think it's unlikely. So I'm going to go with a 2 out of 10 on that one. Onto the, in my opinion, better part of the theory is the Project Serpo stuff. I mean, it's so outlandish in terms of official technology. You know, we can't even get close to the speed of light. So for them to be traveling 50 times it, and also like 60 years ago, is so far-fetched. I mean, if it does allegedly come from leaked government files, then I suppose you have to say it's got some weight to it. But, you know, these files could have been red herrings, or they just could not be real as well. That's an obvious alternative. I'm struggling to give it particularly high on the believability. I think it's not completely beyond the realms of possibility that the governments have maybe had some indication of alien life. I think that's almost, it's reasonably agreed upon that could be the case.
The thing that pains me about that, though, is why would they not want us to know?
There were mass panic across the world, would be my assumption.
Why would there be mass panic if they're just like...
Would you not shit yourself if the breaking news, we've had contact with aliens?
No.
Not at all.
I think would actually be normalised.
If anything, if it was super dangerous, you'd need an army of millions of men, so you'd have to tell people. So it can't be that dangerous.
There's no point.
So I don't understand why you'd want to tell other people.
For instance, do we all agree that we think that any government, like US, whoever, they've had contact with extraterrestrial life?
No, I don't.
So you think never, John?
I'm 50-50. I think I wouldn't rule it out.
Maybe not contact, but they know at least full on that there's existence. So I do. It would not be a shock.
There's a difference between thinking there's aliens out there and government knowing.
Well, it wouldn't be a shock, and it also would be a shock, because as much as everyone believes there's aliens out there, I think it would still be, obviously, the biggest news ever to happen.
You'd be odd thing, about time. In the 40s, obviously, back then it would have created absolute pandemonium, but I think now...
You're seriously telling me you'd be calm if you saw a massive alien ship?
That's different.
I don't think it is.
Give us a controlled announcement, controlled press conference. I say, well, we've been keeping this quiet for a while to establish what's been going on, but we've met some aliens. They're actually all right. Yeah,
but if they then said, and they're going to be landing next Friday, and then comes that Friday, the whole sky just goes black. You see some huge craft come down to Earth.
Yeah,
you'd be terrified.
That's different. That's like them saying, oh yeah, we've got like military grade weapons, and you go, well yeah, obviously it's like par for the course, and then I'm like planting a fucking nuclear bomb outside your house. It's a massively different thing.
I think in terms of aliens as well, everyone always assumes they're way more advanced than we are. But they could not
I
be.
don't think there would be. I reckon there'd be a bunch of like
But it
plebs.
could be just like hamsters or something, or just like bacteria. It could be anything.
How good would it be if they're idiots?
Imagine aliens coming down to Earth at the time of the dinosaurs, and they just get faced by a gigantic Tyrannosaurus Rex.
What if the aliens are bigger
Maybe I scared them
than
off.
dinosaurs?
I think realistically, when you see aliens pictured, they're a similar size to us. But you got to remember, like whatever it is, Bronchosaurus is about 500 times the size of a human and lived on this bloody planet.
If you look at Earth, if you look at every other animal that's on Earth, if they came down to land, then we'd be fine against them because we're the most advanced on our planet out of millions of species. So I suppose if you extrapolate it out, it could well be that there's a planet with just lions on it, but there'd never be any threat.
I mean, the thing is, it could be anything. Look at the way evolution went on Earth. One time it did huge, ginormous dinosaurs. The second time it did us. So
Judging by the
Right.
state of some people in the world, I think some are actual like tangible proof that aliens do exist. So I think we're actually more conditioned to it than what we think.
We're in the best position, obviously, that we could be in terms of our history, just because we're the most advanced and most familiar with it. But I still think it would be horrifying to hear that on the news, unless it was literally like it was ambiotic or something. It was so small.
probably something we're going to touch on quite a bit in a future episode.
Yeah, we're doing aliens one, but I'll wrap up my thoughts on it. I obviously do think there are aliens out there somewhere. The level of evolution that they're at can only be estimated and just complete guessed out of it. You would think there'll be some more advanced, some less advanced than us. This kind of Project Serpo one, it's almost convenient, isn't it, that the aliens that we stumbled across are almost at the exact same evolutionary stage as we were, in terms of physicality. They looked very similar, just with like big eyes. And then if we were capable of matching their technology and getting back to their ship, again, it's a bit of a coincidence for me. So on the Project Serpo one, believability, sorry to do this to you, Callum, but I'm going to have to go 1.5 out of 10.
I wasn't expecting very much anything higher than that. I just thought it was more just a good conspiracy just to recount. Just really enjoyed it. It's in the telling, not in the result.
Yeah, just to go for my ends, I think when it's lower on believability, it's always a bit of a better conspiracy just because it's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just so far-fetched. And even though it's so far-fetched, like people have gone to the length of effort to create these things. You said there's even a website, and it's interesting to see what people can come up with. And I mean, I don't understand physics at all, but I'd love for some proper physicists to, analyze the physics they supposedly looked at and provided. So yeah, I'm gonna score it sort of 8.5 out of 10. In terms of believability, is so incredibly far-fetched. It's just kind of beyond belief in a way. Suggesting that they've managed to travel 40 light years in 10 months is, okay. If you had wormholes, maybe. Then to suggest, there's humans on board, I'll just assume the human body has no chance of surviving it.
They said a couple did die of overexposure to radiation in transit to Serpo.
Just a couple.
Yeah, just a couple. 2 out of 12.
No biggie.
Yeah.
It just seems totally far-fetched. I think in terms of having alien life, I think you'd kind of be stupid not to believe there's aliens out there somewhere, given how big the universe really is. But yeah, it's a low score. I'm going to have to agree with John and go for a 1.5 out of 10, sadly, Callum.
I'm just glad you enjoyed it. I'm not expecting high believability.
I think, as you can tell by my enthusiasm for this, I absolutely love this conspiracy. It's just funny. It's just like so funny that they've gone to like the lengths to all these things. They learn sign language or whatever as soon as they come down.
Yeah.
And they just come down here and crash. Just like a load of coincidences. But it's like so funny, so far fetched. And I kind of, as like a film fan, I now have to maybe reevaluate, maybe consider that NASA are actually the most preeminent film production studio in the world with the moon landings and Close Encounters. So Disney, eat your heart out.
Yeah, every film is trying to mould you to think a certain way. It's always government public information announcements.
So I think for the overall conspiracy, I'm going to go really high. I'm going to give it a 9. I would absolutely love this to be true. I'd be maybe like slightly concerned, but I think after that initial concern, I think I'd just laugh at it. So yeah, I'd love this to be true. For believability, from one end of the scale to the other, the physics about going through wormholes and 50 times light speed or whatever. I mean, it's genuinely it's so ridiculous. Although we do say this is so ridiculous, it must be true. Like that notion that a story is so specific, it can't be made up. This is so ridiculous that it could potentially be true, although it's not. Well, I'm not going to kid myself. So for believability, I'm going to go a little bit higher, just because there are some documents, maybe a little bit of wishful thinking in there as well. So I'm going to go for 2 out of 10.
That's good. I'm pleased with the high rating, so guess I'll just round this one up by saying, if it was true and the US government has indeed sent people to a alien planet 40 light years away, had them come back, been exposed to all their technology, and they've not decided to weaponize it, that is incredibly moral of them. So I'd say big respect on that front.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most unrealistic thing. The fact
Exactly. There's no doubt they've been weaponizing anti-gravity vehicles and antimatter technology, if this really is to be true. So I guess it is safe to say that the person who's concocted this and managed to get so many people to bite on it, because books and things have been written about this theory, it's got a top-tier imagination. And to release all the information in such a way it seems like, it's classified, leaks from emails and what have you, if you check out the actual website. I was struggling with this theory a little bit when I first saw Spielberg and Close Encounters. There's not very much until I stumbled across this link to the Project Serpo. I thought it was just the idea that him and NASA worked together to sort of try and ease the public's mind about UFO sightings. But this Project Serpo really elevated it. So I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit and say give it another 9 out of 10 as a theory, because as you probably could tell as I was reading it, I was struggling to hold it together a couple of times. It's that ridiculous when you're actually reading out what you've written. But yeah, believability, that does definitely have to plummet a little bit. So as much as you do want it to be true, just the idea of two alien UFOs crashing into each other never fails to amuse me. Just to put the images that peeped in my head and the fallout. And just the fact the alien steps out of the capsule, the surviving one, goes to the airbase, and it picks up English almost straight away.
Could have been sign language, though. Might not have been English. We could have a multilingual alien.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, sign language the alien was able to use in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So maybe Spielberg was letting on even more. But yeah, and also the fact that the alien struggled to use its own technology to contact its home planet. But when it died, only, I'd say, a few months later, the US Army were able to crack the code and set up a communication link as well. Definitely adds to believability.
How long was the time frame again? Did you say they cracked it?
Maybe 6-7 months. The alien died in early 1952, and by December 1952, they'd established communication with the planet Serpo.
And how long did it take them to crack the Enigma code?
I think longer than that. It was several years, because it was towards the end of the war they actually managed to start decoding information.
Yeah, I won't expand any further on that, but I think everyone's going to understand my point.
Yeah, food for thought, and doesn't just hold this conspiracy up. So for believability, I think I'll give it, I guess, an extra half a point just because I'd like it to be true. The government is hiding this much from us. They've actually sent people to outer space and beyond to another galaxy at the speed of light, etc., etc. So I'll go for a 2.5 out of 10 on believability. That's been very generous. But yeah, that wraps up one of the less believable theories, I'll say that much. I think we'll round it out and try and continue this theme of potentially unbelievable theories with a game of conspiracy. Back to you, John.
So to round off this week's episode, as usual, we're going to play a little game of conspiracy. So for those of you who are new to the podcast or maybe haven't listened this far before, which I hope is none of you, but you never know. Basically, the premise of the game is I've looked up 2 conspiracy theories online related to the topic. So in this week's episode, it's film. They're normally very outlandish, but somebody somewhere has at least invented them and believes them. And then the other conspiracy I've just made up myself. And the other hosts have to determine which were the 2 that I found online and which one I made up. So I'll give you a quick overview of them, and then you can ask a few more questions and a few more details. Your first conspiracy is that River Phoenix faked his death, and he then went on to become a famous conspiracist called Mark Dice. The second one is that Frozen was created as a global warming / climate change publicity tool. And the third one is that 5G conspiracy theories were actually started by Hollywood as a way to hit back at China.
Right, do you want to give us a bit more detail on?
Yeah.
Start with the 5G in China one, I think.
Okay, so apparently Hollywood were given orders from the government that they had to hit back at China in some way, shape or form. They didn't want to do it as obviously as anti-China films, so they decided to pay some of their most high-profile actors to basically put stuff on social media that were anti-China and their 5G masts and technology. So some of the famous examples of them doing this are Woody Harrelson and John Cusack.
Yeah, I think
that sounds so believable.
I mean,
but yeah, it's so believable that it could be the easiest one to make up as well.
Yeah, the thing with that is you would just feel surely China is probably the second biggest market.
You say that though, but
after USA itself,
really struggle to break China. Let's say Star Wars, for example, always struggles in China for some reason.
But it doesn't help when Disney, not to get too woke here, but it doesn't help when Disney reduce the size of John Boyega on the poster, so he's like Ant-Man on it. And then they
That was
shocking.
then they
That's trying
subsequently
to
come
appease
out.
the Chinese market.
Yeah, then they subsequently come out and say we're all for the Black Lives Matter movement.
Oh,
You know, I know
no,
we
it's
were going
just-
about
that is-
Hollywood
that is
hypocrisy
virtue
earlier.
signaling.
Right, do you want to give some further thoughts onto the other two?
Yeah, okay. I mean, as usual with all three of these, don't press too deeply because there was very little online for all of them. So yeah, River Phoenix faked his death because he hated Hollywood and he wasn't into the drug culture that came along with it. So a lot of people have questioned the fact that if he was allegedly, anti-drug culture, why did he fall victim to a fatal overdose? So he faked it all to get out of the Hollywood life, and then it goes a bit weirder because rather than living a quiet life, he's allegedly gone on to become a conspiracy theorist called Mark Dice, who he certainly shares more than a passing resemblance to.
Andrew's fucking buzzing.
But he's not going to act anymore, so what does it matter?
Wish you can just watch Mark.
I suppose, yeah. And then the Frozen one. So the film Frozen came out as a global warming or climate change publicity tool to basically target children into thinking, that a cold world can be preferable and can have its benefits rather than like a racing hot one all the time. It glorifies the ice world in places and also lets children know that they are the ones with the power to make a change to the climate.
Greta Thunberg watch Frozen. Big fan.
Presumably, yeah.
She's from a cold country anyway. I've never seen Frozen, so I can't really speak if it glorifies a cold climate, but I mean, the title itself would assume so.
I've got one I'm edging to, but then there's going to be someone on like a BBC News Twitter thread that would comment something like this. And if that's all it takes to get on these, then I'm like, that could easily be on there.
That is
Yeah,
literally it,
I can just see it.
Yeah, that's the thing, you can pick holes in the theory, but that's
That's
Yeah,
not
I'm
the
thinking,
game.
do I have a low enough opinion of some of those in society that they'd say that?
Which one are you referring to? Or all of
The China one. If
Oh,
you need, right, so Hollywood need these actors to say stuff bad about China. Look at Trump. Why would they need it? He does it all the time. He calls it the China virus.
I'm guessing for the people who don't listen to Trump,
Unless it's specifically for Hollywood.
Yeah, I suppose Hollywood and Trump don't always see eye to eye.
Yeah, but then they're doing everything they can to appease the Chinese market, as we've already discussed. So that one just seems like so
Yeah,
ludicrous, but I genuinely think someone would say that.
Yeah,
Especially
say that,
with 5G.
I'm also erring to the Frozen one just because it seems it's always sort of too on the nose because, yes, Frozen, okay, it could be anti-global warming. It was trying the Ice Age rather than that. But for someone to make a conspiracy theory link that is the thing that's being used to influence the next generation to becoming climate activists.
I think
It's all
the
about
Frozen
Frozen.
one's the most believable. I mean, anything with
Yeah,
ice in it, people are just going to say it's all about global warming. Like stuff like Toy Story is about the Holocaust. Someone would say Frozen's about global warming, unless it's so obvious that someone hasn't said it.
You're going to let that one go.
Yeah, I think that one's real. So that's the first one I'm letting go.
I think my mind's made up, to be honest.
we always like some disagreement in this.
Yeah, so I think I'll jump in straight away with mine. I'm going to go for the one John's made up, is the 5G Hollywood China. I think for me, Hollywood would not want to lose the market in China, and although it's just got to be one nutter that comes out and says it, I think it's just too convenient that John's made up a theory relating 5G, China, and Hollywood, which is three massive conspiracy talking points. So I'm going to edge towards that one.
It's the holy trinity of conspiracies at the moment.
Right, you two, what are you going to...
Everybody gets my better judgments, but I'm going to stick to my guns and say that the Frozen one is the conspiracy. I'm only on the side of the nutters for this episode.
Okay, George, are you going to agree with one of those two, or are you going to go against those two and go with the River Phoenix one?
My head says the China one is fake, but then I've just got this nagging doubt that there will be some absolute moron on Twitter who says that. So I'm going to even the field. I'm going to go for the River Phoenix one is the fake one.
Oh, wow. So
Definitely.
we have our first ever guest and we have our first ever three-way tie in terms of what everyone's gone for. So obviously one of you is right, and unless it was a double bluff and they're all real or all made up.
That'll be a bit
Put it
hard.
Yeah,
That would break the rules of the game, just to let you know.
It would. I'm always a stickler for the rules, so don't
Yeah.
worry. As well as it being a win for conspiracy, because I've conned two of you.
That's a double win.
It is, yeah. I'm hoping those points go down on my record because I'm trailing at the moment.
Might well do.
But the winner this week is Callum.
Oh,
I did, in fact, make up the Frozen one.
oh my goodness.
Funnily enough, as well, the one with most on it was the 5G one. There was a huge article on it.
Did you say Mark Dice was actually a conspiracist?
Yes.
I can imagine like 50k subscriber special Mark Dice. I am actually really.
I'd never heard of him,
Oh.
but he just looked like him. He looks like what you think he would look like at this age.
I didn't want to give the game away, but I had heard the River Phoenix one before. I'd seen it online. As part of my...
Okay. Oh my god, it was on New York Post, the coronavirus one.
Well, I say, I know we were praising journalism earlier with Spotlight, and that peg has been brought down a bit after that.
Yeah.
I suppose it's one of those ones where you must have seen it's a load of nonsense on Twitter and thought, okay, there's a China, you've got 5G, and you've got Hollywood.
Just put those
Very
three words in
exactly.
it and don't
Yeah,
put
I
anything
get-
else around it.
To be honest, I read the article and there wasn't a great deal of substance to it. But yeah, I guess that wraps up this week's episode. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening, as always. And a huge thank you to George for coming on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
No, you're very welcome. And if any of you want to check out some of George's other projects and the other podcasts that he's on, then we'll put a link in the description for you to check that out. Thanks for listening, guys. See you in the next one.
See ya.
Keep challenging the status quo.